Dr. Taylor, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Taylor was my neuroanatomy teacher at UT Dallas. Really cool class. I love that class. It was very difficult too. Very, very fascinating. One of my favorite things about that class actually was the fact that you brought in brains, like human brains to the class, and we had those labs, and that was so sick. I love that a lot. But so, Dr. Taylor, you are a neuroanatomy researcher, right?
Well, I wouldn't say neuroanatomy researcher.
Right, right.
I actually at UT Dallas, I'm a professor of instruction, so I do not have a research lab. UT.
Oh, got you. But you have been involved in research before.
I have been involved in research, so most professors, to get your PhD in a science, you have to have done research, and then I kind of went beyond that and did a
Mm.
5-year postdoc. So I've had a lot of experience in research, just am not as active in it now. So.
Yeah, and how did you know that you wanted to do research instead of any other things?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, for me, when I was in high school, if I can go all the way back to there, I knew that I wanted to do something that helped people. I knew that I loved science, anything that I was learning more, asking questions that hadn't been asked before and trying to figure out the answers. But I also knew healthcare wasn't for me, not because I don't want to help people. I just had seen people in my own family who couldn't really go home from their patients, and I knew that's the type of person that I was as well. And kind of thinking about work-life balance, I didn't see healthcare as being a good path for me. And then beyond that, I had family members with neurodegenerative diseases, and there were nothing that doctors, healthcare could really do to help them except kind of palliative care. So I wanted to try to, if I could, find uh, help for them, maybe not a cure, but something,
Mm.
understand more about what was going on. But I really didn't know what research was until I was in as an undergrad and had a chance to work in a lab. So I kind of went into college not exactly knowing where my path was because I didn't know that biomedical research was a thing that people could do. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the cool things that you teach in neuroanatomy is figuring out what needs research and how something needs to do research. So that's so sick that you were able to see something in your family and be like, this needs research, you know?
yeah, and I think we all, have that. A lot of times students will raise their hands once in neuroanatomy, we do case
Mhm.
studies, as I'm sure you remember, and they're asked like, how do you treat this? Well, sometimes there's a treatment, but a lot of times it's not really bringing things all the way back to normal, or there might not
Mm.
be a treatment at all. So there are so many places where more research is needed. So
Wow. That is so sick. That is really cool. I love the case studies. Um, did you ever face any challenges similar to that in your own research and you find a way to overcome them?
well, I think in research in general, you're always having challenges. First
Hmm.
of all, you have a question that no one's asked before, or else it wouldn't really be interesting to ask. No one would give you, funding for it. You have to first secure the funding to be able
Mm.
to ask the question, which is convincing other people that not only it's important, which normally isn't that hard to do if we're talking about a disease, right? Everybody can recognize it's important, but that you have the resources and the grit and everything you need to be able to do it. Or they're going to provide you with the financial resources, but you have to be able to, have the right experiment, have access to get the right, even if you have money, it doesn't mean that you have the right tools to use. So you have to convince them that. And then once you start doing research, normally things don't just go perfectly smoothly, the way that you wrote it down in your plan, you're going to do A, B, C, and D. You face obstacles and you have to overcome them. So you're constantly, I think that's what I love about research, although it's what makes it challenging as well. I guess I love a good challenge, but it is something that you're always running into obstacles for. I'm not exactly sure if that's what you're asking. So if you have a follow-up question, feel free.
Well, I guess my next question kind of goes hand in hand with that question, which is, did you have like, I know you worked with was it pre-myelinated axons, and the cerebellum?
Yes. Yes. So when I was a graduate student, I worked on a disease called Niemann-Pick type C disease. And one of the kind of hallmark characteristics of the disorder is that the Purkinje cells disintegrate, which are in the cerebellum. So that's kind of where I started with the cerebellum. It's not specific for Niemann-Pick type C disease. Pretty much any neurodegenerative disorder, there's some degradation of these cells in the cerebellum. And that's a research question itself, is why the cerebellum, and thinking about those cells in general, but I was looking at it from that specific disease state. So we were trying to find, when I was a graduate student, I wouldn't say find, there was a potential treatment that came about. And so what my work focused on was trying to figure out, well, what is it actually doing? So we know it works, but how does it work? Because if we know how it works, that tells us more about how we can make better other treatments, maybe treatments with less side effects, because it was something where it kind of accidentally came about that the treatment was found. And then along with it were several side effects that we didn't know until after we already
Mm,
found out the benefit of it. But as far as myelinated axons go, that was what I did for my postdoctoral research. So a postdoc is the phase after you get your dissertation. So after you defend your dissertation, most people aren't ready to go and start run their own lab yet. No one would hire you to run your own lab without having had a second experience.
mm,
So postdoctoral fellowships, these can range from about 2 years to 5. Some people go even more. Mine was 5 years long. And there I was in a lab that focused on the domains, the axonal domains. So these include the nodes of Ranvier, the little space next to it called the paranode, and then the space flanking that called the juxtaparanode. And then also obviously studying the myelin as well, that's in between those spaces. So yeah.
wow, that is really interesting. And where do you think this research or neuroanatomy as a whole, with all of this new technology coming in, with like artificial intelligence, that's pretty fascinating. Like, if it's intelligent, does it need a brain? Will we need a brain? So I guess the question is, how do you see, like, just in the next 10 years, neuroanatomy um evolving?
Yeah, so I guess like the type of research, maybe there was some neuroanatomy in it for sure. But I was more of a neurobiologist than
Right,
a
right.
neuroanatomist.
Yeah.
People who really focus on neuroanatomy are maybe thinking about specific brain regions or parts. But I guess thinking about neuroanatomy research or any type of neurobiology research definitely our problem, not problem, it is a problem and it's a good thing, is that we have so much data right now. So the things that have expanded exponentially since I really, dived into research when I was a graduate student are all of these computational studies. We can take one cell and just one cell from an animal or from a human and figure out everything that's going on genomically compared to 50 other cells from one specific part of a brain, and then do that in every part of the brain, and then compare that from multiple people, and then you just have so much data. And how do we make heads and tails of it? Because a lot of what people are trying to do is say, like, okay, this person has Alzheimer's disease. This person doesn't have Alzheimer's disease. Let's look at the differences between, pick your favorite, brain region and favorite cell. Let's say the pyramidal cells and the hippocampus, because that's related to, learning and memory, Alzheimer's. And let's compare these cells, but then you get so many changes because maybe they're just differences, kind of innate differences that have nothing to do with Alzheimer's disease, or maybe they do. So kind of picking up what really matters and then validating that, because it's great to find differences, but you have to then prove that they're different. So right now we have just huge amounts of data, and anyone can search and find this data. A lot of labs make it publicly available because they have so much data, but really finding meaning behind it. And it will be a wonderful thing if AI, artificial intelligence, is able to help with that. My concerns with this, I think, have multiple levels of concerns. One, as a college professor, right? But also in research as well, when research integrity is extremely important, right? And we teach that to
Mm,
our undergraduates, and they understand that. It has not been taught yet to ChatGPT, right?
wow.
That integrity matters, or what it really means. Maybe it could define it for you, but it doesn't know how to do it, because what it does is it just scans things and kind of compiles them together. So AI could generate some things that look beautiful. I bet it could show me the Western blot that I'm trying to run. That's a type of a research technique that people will spend a lot of time working on. You could have it make things for you that are fake, that are fabricated. And I'm really concerned that that is going to happen, just with how high pressure everything is. And that is probably going to plague us, in research for the next 10 years. And we're going to have
Mm.
to spend time overcoming that. There already have been lots of instances where papers were published and it turns out they weren't, actually written by, the people who wrote them. They were written with the help of AI, and then there was information that wasn't correct in it. And it's going to be a thing for a while, as we learn how to really use this new technology, um, for the best, or for, to make things better. Yeah.
Yeah, because then AI uses that own wrong paper to give you answers. Like it starts pulling its own information from its own papers. And
Right. And I think we've all seen, photographs of things and it looks so real. And you're like, wow. But then you realize it's AI generated, but it looked real. And I think that it's going to be hard to know. So
or the other way around, where a human makes something that is looks fake somehow. It looks like an AI made it. That's also going to be a thing.
yeah, yeah, I think, figuring out what's real, what's not real. So when someone shows you something, you have to think like, well, did they do this? I mean, or it's not something that I want to have to think about. I want to just be able to trust, people, that if someone said they made something, they did. But I know, on, um, web forums and stuff, if someone posts their artwork, then people start like tearing them apart, like, well, this was AI generated, and they're like, no, here, look, here are the snapshots of me making it. But that's where we are right now in society, is assuming everything is AI. So
Hmm. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how AI could ever possibly, make something as similar as impressive as the brain or nearly close. I mean, I don't even know if that's a good question. But one of the things that I loved about your class was, and we learned this on the first day, it was you showed us a picture of like a hurricane, or maybe it was like a very big cloud. And you told us that when we leave this course, we're gonna look around and we're gonna see the brain everywhere. And when we look at the clouds, we see the ponds and the brain structures, and that's just so fascinating to me. And just thinking about AI making, like these beautiful pictures that somehow look like a brain is interesting to me.
Yeah. So when you were in the class, did you experience that? Were you like studying something and then you walked around and saw,
Yeah,
um, yeah.
for sure.
So the where I got that from, so this actually goes back to research. So as a researcher, I spent a lot of time doing microscopy. And then so you look at tissue under a microscope, a lot of times it was fluorescently stained. And then I would have to go back because an image is just an image. You have to put numbers to it. So I would have to go back and count things, quantify things. And so I've spent probably thousands of hours in my life counting, little dots or little lines in a given space. And then I would find myself like
Mm.
driving and noticing like a pattern, like it's raining and on the windshield and I'm counting and I'm wait, stop. You're supposed to be driving right now, right? Not counting. Or I would find a
Yeah.
pattern as I'm walking, like in a carpet or on wallpaper, and I start counting and I would have to like snap out of it because it resembled that pattern. And definitely now that I'm teaching uh, mainly and doing a lot of neuroanatomy, I will look up at the sky sometimes and I'm like, there's the caudate and the internal capsule and the putamen or whatever it is. You do see those patterns. And yeah, a lot of times the sky does resemble neurons or, certain brain regions. It would probably be something completely different if that was what we were studying, but since we're studying neuroscience, I think it is what you go to. And it's so much that I've said this, I guess, like I've told my youngest daughter that I need to take a picture for my students because the sky looked like, whatever it was. And so she was like, Mommy, today the sky looks like neurons. Like, yeah, it does.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Not something that most 6-year-olds would probably think of, but she also loves so the brain model, the one of the ones that I would bring to class that you could take apart. She calls it her brain puzzle. So if I ever, don't get a
Mm.
chance to drop it off in my office and it comes home with me, my daughter will take apart the brain and put it back together. So
That's insane. That is like so advanced and smart.
I mean, but
Wow.
to her, it's just a puzzle. It's not, she
Right.
doesn't necessarily know, but I hear you.
Yeah, like while you were explaining the design of the raindrops, I was thinking to myself like, man, and now kids just use their iPads when they get bored. But, it could be that they're doing the same thing on their iPad. They're, looking at different patterns and different ways, different pixels and stuff and comparing it to the brain. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely there's something to say about, spending too much time with technology.
Hmm.
But yeah, using your brain to do any type of patterning is it's a good thing, a good exercise. So
Yeah, I mean, isn't that what we're doing at all times? Like, isn't everything that we are seeing and experiencing really just our nervous system? Just like, like it's doing its best to try to translate
yeah,
the
I mean, I
information.
I find that so fascinating. So it wasn't really something we talked about in neuroanatomy, but in Intro to Neuro, we talk about go beyond the visual system and talk about illusions.
Mm.
And so much of what we perceive is really just our brain putting it together for us. So much that we will even, change the color. Like we as in our brain will
Mm.
like alter the color that something is, or, you know, if you've ever looked at a picture and it looked like one thing, and then, someone tells you, oh, it's supposed to be this, and then all you can see is the new thing, you can't go back and see. We really
Mm,
like our, yeah, so what we experience
yeah.
has so much to do with what we're trying to perceive.
Wow. That's right. Yeah, like two people can walk down one street, but if one person is hungry, they'll notice all the restaurants. But if one person is scared, they'll notice all the threats around them and all the things that could go wrong. And at the
Right,
end of the day,
definitely. So, people can be, in the same, I mean, we can all be looking at the same sky,
mm,
and see very, very different things, and have different
right.
experiences. And I think that's one of the beauties of research as well, is that most research communities are very diverse. And that's part of what I'm trying to help do now, is to help make sure that we have continued diversity, that we're, pulling from individuals who are underrepresented in research. Because having people, different people, at the same table who are seeing different things, right, can help ask questions that we've
Mm,
never asked before, and
wow.
come up with new answers, new ways to approach things that we've never thought of before. And there's actually a lot
Wow.
of research to support this. It's not just that it's a good thing, right, to make sure we're including everyone in research. It is scientifically proven that having diverse teams and science moves science forward faster, and that there are better
Right.
outcomes from it.
Wow. Yeah, and especially like even if it's I don't want to say negative perspective, but I'm just thinking about evolution. And every single time that like if something evolves, it's mostly in order to survive. Something bad has happened and now they're changing in order to improve that aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say, to me, it's not just that evolution is necessarily to survive.
Hmm.
If we look at humans, there are a lot of variation in humans, and not everything is for survival. Or at least, or maybe it's just that we live in such a complex environment, right?
Hmm.
That one thing might benefit someone in one situation, but be a negative in another situation. And I mean, looking at us right now, so I have, dark
Hmm.
hair, you have blonde hair, right? So there are benefits to both in different
Right.
environments, but I think, even thinking about this in terms of, neurodegenerative disorders. So some of the things that maybe would help someone survive in a famine might also make them more susceptible to Alzheimer's disease. And there is actually, if you've heard of ApoE, the ApoE4 isotype, um, it if you have both copies of it, it makes you more susceptible
Mm.
to Alzheimer's, but also apparently it evolved because it helps in the times of a famine where there's not enough food. Those individuals are more likely to survive, where those who are more resistant to Alzheimer's might not make it. And so, hopefully the world doesn't suffer a famine anytime, soon. We don't foresee that happening. But I kind of am not clearly explaining myself, but hopefully it makes sense. Like, there are kind of, yes, there are variations, but it's not just that everything continues to evolve so that the older form no longer is useful. It might be useful under a different situation. So that,
Oh, wow. I see. That makes me think of like the singularity a little bit and transhumanism. Like I know there's a lot of people who believe that technology is going to get to a certain point where it's going to be able to basically nest consciousness. And there's the question, right? Like, would you, or the Neolink or different um you know crazy stuff that basically splits up humanity into regular humans and then like the robots, right? Like the people who are um in the computer or have their consciousness uploaded, but there's always going to be
Yeah, I
maybe that
mean,
group of humans
it
who
seems like I don't have a device in this room right now, right? But I mean, most people have an Alexa that live in their house, right? Or they talk to it like it's a person that they use to retrieve information and to turn on lights. And to them, it almost is um, a real identity, a real individual.
right.
And yeah, I can see that could be a
Yeah.
thing, but yeah, it's interesting, right?
Hmm.
Will it ever, like, is anyone ever going to feel bad, right? If you hurt Alexa's feelings or whoever, like I think that's when it starts to become that it's more than just um, technology, that it's um, yeah.
Or when it in one of the newest, well, it's actually pretty old ads for Alexa, it has this mother reading a story to her kid, and she asks Alexa to read a story in the voice of his son's like dead grandma. And she starts like reading it with a deep fake voice of the grandma.
Yeah,
And
I
yeah.
that's really, I mean, it's amazing, right? Like that's cool. But also in the eyes of a child, uh, it is a little bit like, would they now start thinking about that as, that's how they can connect with their grandmother who's no longer there, and um, or kind of getting more dependent on it. We actually, in our family, we have a couple devices, but we don't use it like constantly talking to it. But we have extended family who do. And when my kids are there, I'm like, just go turn on the light. Like, let's stop trying to get the thing to do it, and let's just, but yeah, and there are people who are, very, you it's almost a daily conversation. It's might be the only conversation that they're having is having a conversation with Alexa, who's telling them what the weather's like and who's telling them, the joke of the day, and uh, turning on lights for them and checking their cameras and things like that. So yeah, it is interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, very very interesting. Would you upload your consciousness to the computer if you lived to that point or whatever?
Think so. I guess I would have to, because consciousness, that would be including decision making in my mind. And maybe I'm not a cognitive
That makes
neuroscientist,
sense.
so like separate, maybe there's a separation there that I don't know
Right.
about. But I would say if something had a conscious, then I would trust it to make decisions on its own. And I, I do have a smart thermostat that I guess I have set up to make decisions about when to turn on the heat and when to turn on the air conditioning, but within a framework that I've set for it, right? And I can control. I guess I get concerned when when something's able to act independently,
Hmm.
if it's technology.
Yeah. Yeah, we're still kind of crossing that curve of human biology. I know the story of this one lady who had programmed her Roombot to vacuum her house so that when she got home, her whole house would be clean. But little did she know that her dog had pooped on the carpet, so that the Roomba was dragging it all over the carpet instead of cleaning. She came home, there was poop everywhere, all over her house. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's horrifying. But I guess that would be a case that it would have been nice that the Roomba was like, hey, I'm making a bigger mess, so I'm going to turn myself off.
right.
But I, then, maybe another thing that kind of goes with this are self-driving cars, which are a thing in cities now. I
Hmm.
got to attend Abercam's, the annual, um, I'm gonna mess up the what it stands for, but it's a biomedical conference for minoritized scientists. I got to go to it in November with 10 of the insured fellows, and then two other fellows, so kind of chaperoned them to this conference. And this is kind of, and it was in Phoenix, and in Phoenix, they had just released self-driving cars. And so some people got in the self-driving cars. I was like, oh, no. I was even because it was downtown and we were at a hotel and then had to walk to the conference center. It was a nice walk, but with these self-driving cars, whenever I would like go across a crosswalk, I had one of them like start to rev up, even though it was a red light and I was crossing the crosswalk. And I'm like, wait, is it gonna start driving?
Yeah.
It makes you. I was more concerned about the self-driving car than I was about people who clearly could see me, and knew that it was the red light. What if the car just somehow missed that it was a red light and decided to keep going? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. That's so scary and cool at the same time. Super
Yeah,
strange.
definitely. I mean, there's a cool part to it, but I don't know if I'm ready to get in a self-driving car.
Hmm. I
But
mean,
I,
the lawsuit would probably be really good.
well, as a person crossing the street, I don't wanted to make sure that I would survive
Right.
the
Yeah.
incident. Being in the car, you would probably be good, but
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's gonna be very interesting, especially with the brain. Because AI doesn't have a brain, it just has code, you know? But maybe that's what a brain is after all. Maybe the brain is just code.
yeah, I think it's probably a little more than just, on off, one zeros code.
Right.
But when we think about the neuronal population and, we haven't even really begun to grasp, what it fully takes for us to engage in this conversation right now, right? Where we're kind of throwing different
Right.
things from bringing up memories and, foreseeing things and talking about things in the past. And, you know, we can't even figure this out for one conversation that two people are having. So like to think about the complexity of,
Hmm.
what people do
Right.
in just one day of their life.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
the brain is something that they will never dry up different topics to research, right?
Yeah.
So that's a cool thing about if you're thinking about research and you're looking for an area to focus in, we're we're never going to figure out everything about the brain. There always will be another question.
Well, I think that's what they refer to as the singularity. Like, do you really not think that there will be a point where humans will truly understand the brain or something like that?
I mean, I guess it depends on what you define as understanding the brain. Many people would say that we understand the brain right now. I can point to you all the regions and tell you their
Right.
function,
That's a good point.
but will we ever fully understand what's going on to the point that we're able
Right.
to completely mimic it?
Yeah.
I don't think so. But
Yeah,
to me, it's not like a negative thing to me. To
yeah,
me, it's something that means there's always another question. There's always, something more
for
to
sure.
look at. I also don't believe that there will ever be a cure for cancer because cancer is thousands of different individual disorders that are lumped together as cancer. So maybe
Mm,
we can cure individual kind of aspects, right? Or at least find good treatments for it. But there's not going to be one thing that wipes out cancer, and there's always going to be another form of cancer that hasn't really been evaluated before. But to some people that might be
gosh.
depressing, to I think most researchers because they have inquisitive minds and want to always have something to look for it or not to, but they want to stay busy. They want to have another thing to look at. It's not a negative thing.
Yeah, something that I read somewhere was that civilizations have always compared the brain to its latest form of technology. Like the Romans would compare the brain to a catapult. It would be like, ah, this is how the brain works. And
Yeah, no, I have read that. So Da Vinci
oh,
compared it to a machine, right? And
right,
now we compare it to a computer
the
because to
computer.
us, a computer, is thinking about a motherboard and it's, but what will
Codes.
it be next? Because we're we're almost
Right.
I'm talking to you on a computer right now. I don't know if you have a computer or if you're on more of a tablet. But even a smartphone could do what most of what
Mm-hmm.
we do on a computer. So is the next thing going to get smaller? And when my kids are in college and their intro to, if they even go into science, their intro to biology professors talking about the brain. They were going to use an analogy for a smartphone or a smart watch or something that isn't even invented yet.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a chip that people have implanted. That's um, something that is talked about as well. But yeah, to me, um, I guess thinking about, downloading consciousness or inserting chips like that just seems kind of concerning. What about for you? Would you, if you were able to download your consciousness to a machine, would that be something you would want to do?
Like you said, I feel like it's one of those things that until you have the opportunity to do it, your answer is surely going to, probably change. But if I'm being completely honest, like I don't think I would. Like I personally find the idea of death kind of nice, if like best case scenario it's all black, like cool. But um I think about if, the ability to merge with computers or whatever, and I feel like I don't know, maybe I'll give it a try. Maybe I will. Well, right now that's something that's very popular right now is the virtual reality. That's something that is kind of evolving very fast. Like I think the the VR headset now can basically put you and me in the same room, can scan our bodies and make a 3D version of ourselves that's like perfect. And that I think is just gonna keep getting smaller and smaller. They have the new Ray Bans that can like take cameras and you can ask Meta questions and stuff like that. So I think within the next few years, I think we're going to see a lot of advancements within like virtual reality. And because I think the goal is that you can't tell that you have virtual reality goggles on, because they're so small or lightless or
Yeah, I
intertwined with
guess as a
reality.
professor, that's a little bit concerning. Do I need to, check students' glasses when they're going to take exams. But I think
Yeah.
with that, you know, having kind of technology at your fingertips, if you will, whether it's in glasses or a smartphone, like there's a lot of power in that, but there's also still the need to have a base level of knowledge. And
Mm,
I think it's going to be a little while before
yeah.
things catch up. You know, maybe the next generation of individuals who really adapted or to the new technologies are going to be like, well, we don't need to learn anything anymore, right? Why do I need to know
Yikes.
learn neuroanatomy when I can just look it up whenever I need
Right.
it? But if you maybe imagine a neurosurgeon who needs to make quick decisions and process things, I don't know that you want to turn to AI in that moment, or like I
Yeah.
think, yeah. So of course, this has always been an issue, just on different levels. I won't say the name, but I do know someone who in third grade decided that they didn't need to learn their multiplication tables because they always would have a calculator. And at some point they had to learn them, right?
Hmm.
But maybe they don't fully know them. I don't know. They're a very successful person now. Not me, I learned my multiplication tables, but um, you know, so there's going to be a little bit of a struggle probably in the next, not a little bit, probably a big struggle in the next 10 years with what do we do with this new powerful technology? How much do we let it do? How much do we need to know? So with some of the classes that I teach, I'm not really that worried about neuroanatomy with it, but I teach lab methods class where students write a scientific paper, and AI can actually write a better scientific paper than they can. The first draft of AIs is going to be better than their first draft.
Hmm.
But I still am telling them to write the paper
Mm.
themselves because they have to learn how to write the paper to
Whoa.
be able to evaluate others' papers, to be able to, right? So
Mm.
it's not going to be helpful for them if
Right.
something else does it for them, if that makes sense. I'm still trying to convince students of that. But yeah, I think there's going to be kind of a struggle with that.
Yeah, right. Like the idea of if you give someone crutches who doesn't need crutches and they just use it all the time, they're gonna end up needing crutches by some point.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Um, or maybe even if taking it kind of that analogy, if you have a baby and they're always in a stroller, they're never feet are on the ground, right? They're never going to learn how to walk. And so now you're going to
Mm,
have a 5-year-old who can't walk because
yeah.
they only were ever pushed. And so if we think
Wow.
about an undergraduate who uses AI to write all their papers, and now they're in graduate school, and they should be able to run, and they can't walk yet because they
Mm,
haven't done it themselves. And at some point, it's gonna kind of catch up.
wow. Yeah. It kind of reminds me a little bit of simulation theory, which is just basically the idea that technology got so good. Like if technology can get so good to the point where we can't tell the difference between reality and virtual reality, that is then theoretically that is potentially something that could have already happened. And we are right now inside of the virtual reality. We're inside of a game. We're dehydrated. And instead of like taking off the goggles, we just keep trying to simulate reality to another extent. Um, but yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, I would hope if someone did do that, right, that there wouldn't be so much pain, so much problems that occur in the world, right? I
ooh,
mean, we live um,
Right.
in a place where there are constant tragedies and wars and um, you know,
Yeah.
I guess if it's been a long time since I watched The Matrix, but I do remember that they purposely had to add things like that in so that, but it wasn't to the
Oh,
extent that it is now, right? So
yeah.
I'm pretty sure we're not living in a virtual world.
Yeah.
Um, but
And
I guess you wouldn't know. You would just know what you're able to perceive, to experience. So,
yeah, and let's say that this we are inside a video game right now. Um, it's still, I think it would still be pointless to not run your whole life or like as a baby, to not do these these practices. And because let's say you do take off the headset and you were playing a video game the whole time, like you could have learned what it was like to run, and that kind of like stays within you and changes. Like I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's always worth it to learn and to put in the work instead of using AI.
yeah, definitely. But there probably are benefits to AI once it um, gets smart enough to really figure out how to distinguish truth from things that are false. So
Mm,
a big issue that I have had with AI that it gives false information,
yeah.
but not just the false information, but more it kind of creates false sources and things like that. And so if it weren't doing that, right? If it were able to put things together without the false information, I think it will be even more of a powerful tool. But still, I feel like even though AI can write code for a software engineer, you still would have to know the basis of coding in order to know whether the code that AI is writing for you is good, or if it's really going to do what it needs to do, right? And
Hmm.
so the same for scientific research with all of these data sets, there's a lot of coding and a lot of, different things that need to happen. And I do think that AI can be a powerful tool to someone who is already trained in whatever the technology is to help them to do things quicker than they can. But you have to first have a really good understanding of what it is that you're trying to do before you're having AI help you do it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, Dr. Tiller, we have reached 10 o'clock. Do you have a little bit more time, maybe for a few more
Yeah, I
questions?
have a little bit more time. So one thing that I haven't had a chance to talk about, if you don't mind, would
Yeah, sure.
be the research programs that I am involved in now, or if you had
Oh
questions about
yeah, of course.
like undergraduates, like doing research,
Yeah.
anything, I have a couple minutes for that.
Yeah,
So
I actually I just enrolled in the Children and Families lab at UTD as my first lab. So I'm excited for that.
so have you started working in the lab yet?
Not yet. Today we have our first in-lab meeting, actually. To-
Very cool. Well, I'm excited for you. So when you're working in a research lab, normally like getting started, there's a lot of training that you have to do.
Oh yeah,
You
the
probably
first
have to
time.
do all of the city admin,
Hmm.
training, and if you're working with animals or in a wet lab, there's a whole bunch of different EH&S trainings that you do, and then reading papers to kind of get caught up on what's already been done in the lab and what others are doing so that then you
Hmm.
can really start to play a role in the research. So
Yeah. Very, very fascinating. I'm actually like looking into right now. I'm trying to decide because I graduated in December, so I'm trying to decide whether I want to go get my PhD or my master's. And um, yeah, because like if I were to get my master's, I think I would go towards more of the therapy side of things. But if I get my PhD, I think it would go for research, which I'm very fascinating in. So, did you mention that you're doing research right now?
Yeah, so
Oh,
the way that I'm involved in research right now is that I'm helping to run some programs at UTD for undergraduates. So the first one that we started, or kind of the first name that we had for the program was Ensure. So enhancing neuroscience undergraduate research experiences. And this
whoa.
program was, or its program was aimed at students who are underrepresented in biomedical sciences and neuroscience.
Mhm.
This includes students with disability,
Oh,
students of
wow.
low economic, socioeconomic status, students from certain backgrounds, racial backgrounds. So a variety of different individuals, but anyone could apply to the program, and it was a 2-year program.
Mhm.
And so we were trying to get funding from this from the National Institutes of Health, NIH. Unfortunately, we tried a couple times and we got like right there, but we weren't quite there. And then we ended up putting in the same proposal for the research program to a local foundation, the North Texas Care Foundation. And they actually funded us
Oh, wow.
for 2 years. And so we were able to start a cohort. And then we ended up, so we kept pursuing the NIH funding because it's renewable. It's something you can continue to get. So we ended up getting that. And it was too much to call one to to have two different versions of the same name. So we ended up with a different name, which is what NIH calls it anyway, which is MARC. So it's maximizing access to research careers, kind of the same goal, except at UTD, one of the things NIH wanted us to do was for it to be bigger than neuroscience. So they were like, great, you're good at neuroscience, but it should be all biomedical research. So this includes the engineering schools, the natural science schools, as well as BBS. So neuroscience and psychology, which we already were having the Ensure program for. So now we have the MARC program. And so what these programs, or what happens in both the programs, is that students take a research skills class with me in the fall. And then after that, we help, or while they're in that class, we help them get placed in a lab. So they get to meet different researchers throughout the course, and they pick their top 3 labs, and we kind of match everybody up. And so then they start working in a research lab in the spring of the first year that they're in the program. And so they work in the spring, they work throughout the summer, so a full summer without taking classes. And then in kind of keep going in the fall. And with the MARC program, what they're due is they spend one summer at UTD, and then their next summer they do an external research experience. So they'll pick a school that we have a partnership with to go there and spend the summer there and do research in a different lab. And then we'll come back and get to spend the fall and the spring in their lab. So we're really excited that we got funding for this, and
Wow.
we have got both of these. The Ensure program is finishing up. And then the MARC program is really just getting started up with their fellows. They finished the class with me in the fall, and they just are starting in their research labs. But it's been a really cool experience to go from teaching a class to students where, some of them had, well, many of them had never picked up a pipette before, loaded a gel, held a mouse before, and I taught them those skills, and also how to write a paper, how to read a paper, how to give a poster. and they planned a little experiment that they did in the class and presented it as a poster.
Wow.
From that to the end of their first summer, where we had one amazing neuroscience student who was selected to give one of the platform talks for the surf program and got up on a stage in front of 1,000 people and just completely rocked the
Wow.
talk, talking about the research that they had done in the last, you know, 7 months. And then took those students, and everybody gave a poster, and then took that same group of students to this conference that I was talking about. And it, see, we had 10 of our Insure fellows go. And out of those 10, 5 of them won awards, won poster awards. And I mean,
Wow.
maybe that doesn't seem like that big of a number, but there were other schools who brought 10 people and nobody won an award, and we had 5 people who won awards. So it was, and of course, they're the ones who won an award and the credit goes to them. But it was really rewarding to get to see, like, they, a year before, they were, shy and getting up and, not sure how to do a poster in my course, to being able to do one on an international setting, and really just succeed at it. So I'm excited to see the future of now, not the Insure program, but the MARC program, but also to keep following the fellows from the Insure program and see, what their future holds with uh, pursuing research careers. So
Wow. That sounds amazing. That makes me wish that I could do it, but I graduated in less than a year. Is that a
yeah,
new
well,
program?
if you are interested, so you said, is it a new program?
Hmm.
Yeah, so the Insure one, you would have been eligible to apply for. That one we started last fall, so 2022. So we took applications like in the spring of 2022. The MARC program, though, this is aimed at rising sophomores because it's a 3-year program. So we need people who have 3 years
Oh,
left at
wow.
UTD. You don't necessarily have to be a sophomore, but
Right.
you have to have three
3
years left at
years.
UTD. So
Yeah.
sometimes a transfer student, maybe they've done 2 years at a community college, but they still have 3 years left of their major. So you can check out the MARC program. So the website, it's just UTD MARC. If you type that in into Google, you'll find. And MARC is MARC.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
Gotcha.
So it's maximizing access to research careers is what it stands for.
Wow.
But what I was going to say is, since you are kind of maybe thinking masters, maybe a PhD, one thing that I didn't know as an undergraduate until someone told me, and it kind of sealed the deal for me to go into research, was that a lot of times PhD programs pay for you to go. They pay you to go. You get a stipend. And I didn't mention that the SMART program and the Insure program that I talked about, these students are getting a stipend. Part of the tuition is
Mm,
covered. Part of their housing is covered to help them
wow.
do this. But graduate schools, not for masters, but for PhD, you don't have to pay tuition in most places, and you're paid a livable stipend. Now, it's minimum, you're not going to be, putting money into your 401k when you're a graduate student, but you're a student. But it's enough to live
Hmm.
in whatever area it is. And that's for biomedical research. And I don't, if you're more interested in psychology research, there's kind of, it depends a little bit. But even in psychology research, if it's through more of a biomedical research program, there would be, you know, a stipend and things related to it. If it's clinical psychology research, typically there is no,
Okay.
you're paying the tuition, but if you're interested in the research part of it, one thing that you might want to look into are post-bac programs. So when I was in undergrad, I hadn't even heard the word post-bac. I don't know if people were using it yet. It wasn't something that was talked about, but especially in this kind of post-pandemic world, post-bac programs are expanding exponentially. They're showing up multiple places, and some don't have funding, but some do have funding. And so maybe doing a year post-bac program that has a research opportunity, that's kind of research focused that could act as a stepping stone to a PhD if you decide that's what you want to do. But it also wouldn't hurt, if you do a year post-bac program and they're like, okay, maybe it's research is not my thing.
Right.
Maybe I want to do clinical psychology, but to get that kind of chance to think about that. So
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. That I'm definitely gonna check that out. I'm super into both fields right now, so it's like I'm doing a little bit of everything, looking
yeah,
everywhere.
I mean, I think you can do both.
Ooh.
That's especially,
Yeah.
with clinical psychology, there is an opportunity to also do research. And I'm not a psychologist, so I'm maybe not the best person to ask about that. But it has been
hmm
great talking to you. Thank you for having me.
You too, Dr.
Yeah.
Taylor. Thank you so much. I did have one tiny question.
Okay.
Do you have any books that you would like to recommend, maybe about biology or neuroanatomy that really inspired
Okay,
you or
there's
something?
one. Let me find the title of it.
Yeah.
That is a neuroscience, like,
Sam Harris?
no, there's one that is basically so you want to be a neuroscientist type thing. And I
Oh,
don't, is that actually
Eskimo.
what it's called? Yes, it actually is called. So that was what came to my mind, but I was like, oh, am I just making this up? So there's a book, it's called So You Want to Be a Neuroscientist. And the author is Ashley Javanti. I can send you the information. And so if anyone, and it says neuroscientist, but I think it also includes the field of psychology. It's really if you're interested in the brain. And what it does, there wasn't a book like this when I thought I wanted to be a neuroscientist. I had a student who's in the program, the intro program, showed it to me and I asked if I could borrow it. And so I read it more as kind of an instructor, that level of it, but looking at it to see. And I found that it was really helpful. It talked about things like where neuroscience is going. It
Hmm.
explained things like I just told you about, PhD programs actually can pay you to do research and also was just kind of
Yeah.
fun to read. And it is based on, I guess, so I'm sure you know Ramonica Hall.
Mm.
Ramonica Hall actually wrote a book about being a neuroscientist because he's kind of who we think about as a neuroscientist. And apparently but it was back in the time that only, males and certain it
hmm
would have been a nurse, so it was kind of written more in that way. And so it's talked about in this book that it's kind of the modern version, if you will, that's much more inclusive and updated. So
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's going to be in the description. And if anybody has any questions from this podcast, is there an email that people can write to you or anything that you would
yeah,
prefer?
so my UTD email, it's anna.taylor2 at utdallas.edu. And Eric can also share that because that too, it's hard to
Yes,
remember to put
that's
that
going to
in.
be on
So
the description for sure. All right, Dr. Taylor, thank you so much. Once again, this has been a blast. I have so many questions and barely got through my list, but thank you so much. It was a lot of fun.
Bye.
Have a good day. Bye bye.